This meeting has been posted in compliance with the open meeting law, and all members are present, so a quorum is present. All right, and then we'll move into the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll move into public comment. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific agenda item. Members of the public may participate in the meeting without being physically present by one of the following methods. Written comments, and then to comment during the meeting, members of the public may call 702-589-9629. And the public comment period is now open. Okay, public comment period is closed. We'll move into the agenda item number 1. For possible action, approval of the minutes of the February 23rd, 2022 regular meeting.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as printed.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
We need a second.
I thought
Second.
Charlie. Oh, Ray?
Second.
Okay, Ray wants to second it. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, motion carried, minutes approved. For possible action, courtesy review and recommendation on proposed changes at 502 Nevada Way relative to the adopted exterior design guidelines for that area.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The new owners of this property are proposing to remodel the former flower shop into a deli and bar. In terms of the existing adopted guidelines for the downtown area, contributing design elements are not required to come before the committee for review, and among the listed contributing design elements are, quote, sidewalk shading canopies, arcades, porticos, and awnings, unquote. As both a portico and awning are proposed, the owners are bringing the attached preliminary concept drawing to the committee for a courtesy review. And you've got attached all the background information historically for this property, as well as current photos and a report from our historic consultant, Courtney Mooney.
Okay, very good.
And also the owners are present as well as the architect.
Nice to have you. Thank you for being here. All right, do we have any comments at this time? Courtney? Okay, we're going to go ahead and have you report Courtney first. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
For the record, this is Courtney Mooney with Northwind Resource Consulting. So we did a preliminary review of the submitted plans and elevations for conformance or compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards and the design guidelines for commercial properties, Chart 4. And again, this is pretty preliminary because there's a couple of things that we still don't know. There's some details that we still don't have, as you know, as this is a pretty early look at this project. But we found that generally it was compliant with the Secretary of the Interior standards and the Chart 4 commercial design guidelines.
Okay, all right. Very good. Anyone else want to comment?
I just have a question. If it's a preliminary review, you'll continue to wait for additional information before a permit is issued?
I might turn this over to Susan to answer that.
Well, I think the intent for the preliminary review is to get any preliminary input from the committee before they go further with their plans.
Okay.
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 So preliminarily, I approve the project.
One of the things I would add we're waiting on is we're not really sure the date of the alterations when they occurred. So that would be something that should I be directed by the city to do further research, I would find out. So that could fill in some of those NAs that I had in the chart for the standards review.
Okay. Any other comments?
One other question, and may not be for this, but for future clarification. Were you using, or when do you use the Secretary's standards for restoration? Because you're restoring a non-historic feature, the arcade. Or is that considered a rehabilitation?
It's rehabilitation, but the rehabilitation currently is the only set of standards that is posted on the city's webpage. So that's kind of my default. I don't think it's quite codified yet that allows all of the other standards of review. So that's the one that I used.
Should us look at those other standards?
Well, that's in my presentation, item 3.
Okay, we will wait for that then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm just gonna make a quick one. Well, it's nice to see that something's happened with that building down there. I know that it's not a contributing building, but it looks like with the plans, with the put little portico over the front, it's kind of trying to give back a little reflection to match the rest of the older architecture in town. So that's a good thing. I think it's just, obviously it's not going to bring it back into a contributing building. I'm sure to do that it would cost a huge amount of money, but preliminarily, I'd go along with what you're trying to do. It looks like it's been well thought out. You've been doing your homework on it and working with the city, et cetera. So I don't have any problem with the preliminary approval. Just my thoughts.
Thank you, James and Rebecca, for all your hard work, and we're looking forward to
Glenn, sorry,
seeing what you have. I'm sorry, Ray, go ahead.
Just wanted to say thanks very much for your thoughtful consideration, and we really appreciate you doing this here in our town and putting a historic building to good use. Everybody's very excited about it. So, thanks very much.
And I will second all of that. I'm anxious to get going. I want to go to this place and eat something. So, anyway, yeah, no, it looks beautiful, and I'm sure Alan's taken care of you. So yeah. So anyway, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Rebecca and James, right? Yes. And we're looking forward to the project immensely. Good luck. I don't think we need to make a motion, do we? This is just preliminary. Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Moving on. For possible action, committee direction to Northwind Resources LLC on potential changes to the adopted exterior design guidelines for various properties in the historic district.
Courtney Mooney of Northwind Resource Consulting. And I think I can, oh, look at that. She's so good. Okay. So Northwind was asked to come to the meeting tonight and present some ideas regarding the treatment of non-contributing properties within the Boulder City Historic District as part of our process of revising the historic design guidelines. So to prepare for this, we reviewed your draft ordinance and researched several other cities' ordinances and guidelines, and we've prepared a recommendation for your consideration. And I thought I'd start by discussing how the current, I always forget where to point this. How the current draft ordinance addresses non-contributing resources with the understanding that it is a draft and it's still a work in progress. The current draft ordinance, and I know some of this is going to be a little repetitive for you, but I think it'll help members of the public that might be listening. The current draft ordinance provides a definition for non-contributing resources, and it's important to note that non-contributing resources are only located within historic districts. So this does not apply to individually designated properties that are outside of the district. Essentially, a non-contributing resource is a building, site, structure, or object that does not add to a historic district's sense of time, place, and historic development, but it may contribute due to its mass, scale, streetscape features, setbacks, or proximity to contributing structures. It may be one that's constructed outside of the period of significance for the district, has been altered or impacted in other ways such that it no longer possesses historic integrity, or is incapable of yielding important information about the period. And importantly, the definition states that a non-contributing resource remains subject to the draft ordinance, the historic preservation ordinance. A historic district is defined essentially as a geographically definable area that may include contributing, non-contributing, or undeveloped properties. So again, it's you know, in the ordinance that the non-contributing properties are within the district. So within the ordinances section for certificates of appropriateness for alterations or new construction affecting landmarks or historic districts, the ordinance states that it applies to all designated buildings, including those located within a district. So that includes non-contributing. And it then goes on to say that an application for certificate of appropriateness will be required for alterations in new construction, such as additions and infill, and the C of A will be reviewed for compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties and any applicable adopted design guidelines. So the design guidelines currently do not have a section for new construction and infill. So as it stands now, alterations to non-contributing resources would have to meet the same design guidelines as contributing resources. And there's some nuances to that, and we'll get to that later. The draft ordinance contains a definition of the standards and includes language about the 4 treatment approaches: preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, or reconstruction. However, only the standards for rehabilitation are posted currently on the city's historic preservation page. Now, I mention this because alterations to non-contributing properties are most likely to fit under rehabilitation or reconstruction, and I think it's important to codify the options. So rehabilitation acknowledges the need to alter or add to a historic property to meet continuing or changing uses while retaining the property's historic character. So as an example, this is the treatment approach that was chosen for the water filtration plant because it allows flexibility in order to bring it back to code and accommodate a new use. And this would be an appropriate approach for owners of contributing and non-contributing properties who might want to make a compatible alteration, such as a new porch, but they don't want to, recreate something historic or maintain historic accuracy or bring a non-contributing property into contributing status. So they just want to do an addition and they want it to be compatible, and that's rehabilitation. I am so sorry, I'm one slide behind. Reconstruction recreates vanished or non-surviving portions of a property for interpretive purposes. Now, this includes recreation of missing components in a historic district or site. So an example where this might be appropriate is the reconstruction of a building that burned or was demolished. And the building is necessary to fully interpret the district. And a local example would be the water tank on Lodge Road, because this is, really integral to this district. If something happened to that, you might consider reconstructing it, as a way to interpret the whole purpose that, Boulder City is here. This approach would apply only to non-contributing properties constructed within the period of significance, wishing to recreate a lost feature in order to become contributing. And in some rare cases, contributing properties wishing to become individually eligible. That's a little tricky. Usually they don't like reconstruction, but that's, on a case-by-case basis. So the key is to have sufficient historical documentation, such as photographs, drawings, maps, etc. Reconstructing a historic facade without this physical evidence of the design style and other architectural features is really not typically supported. So now we'll take a look at the city's current design guidelines. The current master address chart doesn't include all properties, so there's some that are excluded because they were constructed outside the period of significance. All commercial properties and accessory buildings are included, and city-owned buildings have specific guidelines for each building, even one that was constructed in 1990. So although it's not explicitly stated on this document, properties located within the district and not included on the list would be reviewed for compliance with the standards and not the design guidelines. So now I'll provide an overview of what I found in researching other cities' ordinances. I basically found 4 main approaches for regulating new construction and infill. That being said, there is a lot of overlap, so I tried to aggregate these as simply as possible. So some cities break it down by minor versus major construction, and that's it. There are varying definitions of each, and they go from, percentage of work to building size. So anything that's minor is 25% and under of the building size. Minor would be over, 26% and over. Or just an act. If you're going to build a whole room, that's major construction versus minor construction. So the commonality is that minor construction on non-contributing properties is usually reviewed administratively for compatibility with the district, and major new construction would typically be referred to the board for review. Major construction guidelines are typically more prescriptive than those for minor construction. So another common approach is to include language in the ordinance that directs applicants to new construction guidelines for alterations to non-contributing resources and infill. So for Boulder City, since there is not that section currently, that would require a new section in the design guidelines. And this works well for infill and buildings constructed outside of the period of significance established for the district. So for example, we'll look at 554 Nevada Way, which is, let me go back to this, sorry. We'll look at 554 Nevada Way, constructed in 1936 in a minimal traditional style. And this building was determined to be non-contributing in the last survey update due to facade alterations. It's had its windows removed and the door was moved. The current commercial design guidelines, Chart 4, includes contributing and non-contributing design elements, 2 of which, including sidewalk shading canopies, arcades, porticos, and awnings, and sculpted detailed parapet caps would not apply to this building. So in this case, reviewing the alterations based on the standards would be more appropriate. Now, new construction section can be more subjective, requiring what is called a design within context approach, or very prescriptive, similar to the current guidelines that recommend specific elements per location within the district. Some ordinances include language requiring new construction and alterations to non-contributing properties be reviewed for their overall compatibility with within a well-defined context. So again, this approach called designing within context is essentially based on the standards. Historic materials shouldn't be changed by new construction or alteration. New work should be differentiated from the old. It should not adversely affect any character-defining features of the overall historic district, and it should be reversible. This approach focuses more like on a broad experiential level rather than literally copying the features of adjacent historic buildings. Often the larger design aspects of the project, which is placement, orientation, scale, mass, how it contributes to the rhythm of the street and the form, carry more importance than the more specific design aspects. So typically this approach requires main contextual elements, and the interpretation is performed by staff and/or the board. I've used Birch Street as an example here. If you wanted to build a new house in this neighborhood, the contextual elements for Birch Street would be, one story, massing, your porch is gonna face the street. It's covered but not enclosed. So, and how it is situated on the street, et cetera. And the last approach that I found was the hybrid approach, which is very similar to what you have now, with just a couple of missing elements. The hybrid approach includes subjective guidelines for new infill and alterations for non-contributing properties constructed outside of the period of significance. So if you're not in the period of significance, it's really hard for you to, like for instance, a commercial building built in 1960s, you wouldn't want them to just put an arcaded porch on. That would look kind of weird, on that building. So what you have now is very similar to this hybrid approach. So again, you have a little bit more subjective guidelines for the buildings outside the period of significance and more prescriptive guidelines for alterations to non-contributing properties constructed within the period of significance, such as the existing design guidelines that you have. So that's possible here. Structures outside of the period of significance are still encouraged to restore original elements that contribute to the character of the district as a whole, but they aren't required to create a false sense of history. So that approach is, again, really close to what you have now, and that's kind of what we're recommending. So for those of us who are a little more visual, I thought this might help. This might help explain the hybrid approach. Properties constructed within the period of significance, 1931 to 1945, contributing, individually eligible, and non-contributing would follow adopted design guidelines for rehabilitation and reconstruction. Properties constructed outside of the period of significance and up to 50 years old, rehabilitation, new construction, and infill would be reviewed for compatibility with the historic elements of the building itself and the surrounding context. I used 1400 Wyoming as an example here of a new building constructed in 2001 that is clearly pretty contextual with its surrounding historic fabric. Again, the context would need to be clearly identified for different areas of the district. On the top right is a very quick and dirty map showing different areas of the district that would have different contextual elements. And I understand that there are nuances to each that aren't really quite reflected. It's more of a blob example, but it's basically showing commercial, public, different residential areas and more industrial uses that might have different contextual design elements. And in addition to maps, some cities use illustrations such as the one on the bottom right. This is from the city of Denver, and this demonstrates an area's contextual elements. This one shows new infill, which is the building in blue, and how it conforms to the existing height of the buildings, window height, porch height, massing, setback, etc. Illustrations like these are very helpful to applicants, staff, and committee members when planning for projects and conducting reviews. They don't have to be this complicated. Most other cities that I saw just used aerials, photographs, or just sketches. So it doesn't have to be that detailed. Adopting the hybrid approach would require a new construction infill section in the design guidelines, as well as some mapping and illustrative efforts. So now I'd like to hear from the committee if you have any questions or thoughts about that approach or any of the other approaches that I discussed in the presentation.
Okay, any comments from the committee?
I know it's a little confusing. And
I don't know, I'll make an effort to comment briefly, because I'm not sure I understand all
Okay,
this.
I'll do my
Courtney,
best to help out.
Well, it looks to me like the bottom line is that a non-contributing building, obviously you can't apply the guidelines to it, so you use only the Secretary of Interior standards when evaluating whether or not a non-contributing building is, well, it can't be contributing, but at least it's okay. Is that kind of correct?
It's close, very close.
Well, that's about as
So
close as I ever come.
if you look at the screen, you can see that there's non-contributing buildings that were built within the period of significance, and that's the little house on the right is one of them. So if they want to do anything to their house, like say maybe they want to take off that porch addition and they want to put on a different, they want to maybe build something that's more compatible, they would have to meet the design guidelines for those homes. So, and what, you guys have design guidelines for those homes. So they would have to meet those design guidelines. For a building that is outside of the period, like it was built 1946 and newer, you can't, it would be inappropriate to apply the same design guidelines to them. Because a lot, especially with the commercial buildings that are on Nevada Way, they were built according to Reclamation, and others. Reclamation wanted the arcaded canopies and the parapets and all that stuff, and some of them just don't have, after 1946, they just don't have them. So it's not really appropriate to say, if you want to build a porch or something, it has to be arcaded and you have to have a parapet, right? So does that make sense? Okay, so in that sense, then, in that case, then those would be reviewed under the Secretary of the Interior standards for a more kind of, contextual, compliance with a more contextual review.
One of the questions that I come up against, and maybe you can enlighten me a little bit, because I'm interested particularly in the Avenue homes, okay? From Avenue B over to the alleyway between F and G. My understanding is that all of those houses originally were built by the six companies in 1931, 1932, every single one of them. But if you look in the Janus report, and I'm comparing to your report, I haven't waded all the way through, but I find notations that say built in 39 or built in 42. None of those houses, all of those, unless they were burned down, torn down, rebuilt, whatever, were built outside of the period of significance, okay? Is that true? I don't get where some of these dates are coming from, because prior to 1960, you can't get anything from the city in terms of building permits and so on. I don't know where that information comes from. Can you enlighten me?
So I can only speak for our report. We used the Clark County Assessor build dates, which they varied all over the place. But we did note in the narrative that they were all built during this time, because we knew that from Janus and we knew that from other research that we'd conducted. But the Clark County Assessor build dates are they're kind of all over the map. So those are in one place, but in the narrative we state that they were all built during this time. Because yes, they were all built, as you said, in that small window of time. Yeah. What I have found is that if an addition is made onto a building, sometimes they'll lose that initial record of the original construction of the dwelling, and then the only one they have is that addition, and that's the one they use. So if you built an addition in 42, they'll say, oh, well, we don't have anything older, so it was built in 42. That's what
well,
they use.
that's the other question I have, because sometime after 36, 37, people began to modify those houses.
Yeah.
And if they modified them before 1945, they're still within the period of significance.
Sure.
So, but how do you know? Well, anyway, whatever. I'm just confused.
Well, let me back. When do we take that into account? That it's a historic addition that should be preserved
Well, yeah, additions
or
are
treated appropriately.
additions are a whole other thing. If it's, constructed within the period of significance, then that addition is, part of the historic fabric of the building at that time. And again, this is where, and I know that this is not a popular methodology, but sometimes it's just very subjective. So you have to look at each building and kind of make a determination of, if it was built within that time period, even I don't know. That's a hard one. It's hard to just make a blanket. I apologize. I can't make a blanket statement about additions. But typically, if they're built within the time period, then they are considered part of the historic fabric.
So we'd have to address that hopefully somewhere within the guidelines for new construction, but also additions or changes that occurred within the period of significance. Yeah. Or that took on, well, they're within that 50-year mark too. That adds a little weird, wrinkle too. So is it historic just because it's within 50 years? I don't think so, but maybe it's maybe Frank Lloyd Wright added a piece to, a building, right? And
yeah.
So that's a whole other thing.
With our report, when we were doing the survey, we took into account a lot of changes that were occurring that were very common. So, like for instance, with the Avenue homes, a lot of people filled in their screen porches, and so that wasn't necessarily a ding against them. It was, if you filled it in and you took out all the windows, then that would be an issue. But if you filled it in with all the same window sizes, it was still considered, that wasn't a mark against the building. So that's because that was something that was happening. Another example might be a neighborhood, a World War II neighborhood where, in 1947, everybody's building an addition, for that extra room, so that would be considered part of the historic fabric. I hope that helps.
I had a couple questions. Can you clarify under the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, if not also reconstruction, the definition of historic property? Is that just a single building, or would that also apply to a historic district?
I'm not sure where.
On page 50.
Oh, I've got a different.
Or I'm assuming you got this from the Secretary of Interior standards.
Oh, it's the actual slide about the rehabilitation slide?
Correct.
Okay. I think it's slide 5. I think that's what I've got. Thank you. Yes. So, yes, this came straight off of the Park Service website.
But do you interpret historic property, quote unquote, to be just a single building, or does that also apply to historic districts? So if you add to a historic district to meet continuing or changing uses, I don't know what I'm trying to say as far as, if you change a building or if you alter a building, you're not only changing the building, but you're changing potentially the historic district.
I can't speak for the Park Service, but I think we always use this in terms of a single building.
Okay. And then my next question is context. Is that something you think that we would have to add to our guidelines? Whatever that definition is, but also, or is it a summary of kind of common characteristics, character-defining features, location, or?
So fortunately, a lot of that work, again, is already done. So in the design guidelines, there are a lot of contextual elements in there already. So it's just a matter of kind of getting them to work with however the district map would be separated out, however that is. And again, like I said, that one that I showed was like a blob. So there's a lot of, kind of overlap in some of those areas too. But essentially, a lot of that work is done, so it would just be taking a look at, making sure that it works within the sort of section area boundaries that are chosen.
So that was then leading to my next question. Is there such a thing as subcontext, meaning like the Ash, Birch, Cherry Street, there's some commonalities within blocks. And then, so one block will have the design that's built by, one design firm or architect. And then the next block on the same, though, Birch Street, let's say, it's a different architect. So that subcontext could exist within the residential area, is what I'm getting at, by maybe by neighborhoods or blocks or however they've been lumped, or however they were originally lumped by the planners, the DeBoer and the government, federal government. So I guess that's what I'm wondering. I guess we'll figure that out as we go forward with drafting this, but I can see there may be a need to pinpoint subcontexts within the bigger blob context.
I think I see what you're saying, and let me know if I'm off base. I think some of those more specific things that are really specific to the different builders can be handled in the design guidelines. And the bigger picture items are things like setback, 1 story, that type of like form and massing type of stuff, and not necessarily, and I may even have gotten too detailed when I said, that the porches are covered but not enclosed. That might be something that's in the design guidelines. So that's how I see it. I don't know if that's how you think that could be handled.
I think it could be handled that way. I think it's that classic lumpers and splitters, how you could identify and how they would apply as a chunk or individually. So that'll work, I think. That's all I had.
I have one more thing, Courtney. In January, you made a presentation, and we were asked to make comments, and I submitted comments, and I don't know whether you ever got them or not, and I'm not sure that some of them are probably not germane anymore, but they were at the time. So anyway, I hope you get those.
I did, and I actually, I believe some of those were already incorporated into the draft, ordinance. Thank you. And then there are some that can be applied in future as we move forward.
Right, yeah, I think so. Some of these probably don't apply anymore, but I was just hopefully that you at least got them.
I did, yes.
You could have ignored them if you wanted to. I don't care.
This is a question maybe for both you and Michael, but you're suggesting that reference to the Secretary of Interior's standards for reconstruction should be codified?
Yes, and I actually put some language in the draft ordinance. I don't know where the draft ordinance is now, but I suggested, that was one of my recommendations, was to include all of the treatment options in the draft ordinance. I know reconstruction is kind of a sticky one, but I think it's, it's important, especially if one of the goals of the committee is to help people bring their buildings back to contributing if they want to, and that's essentially reconstruction. So that should be something that's definitely an option that's available.
Well, obviously this is concurrent activities going at the same time. And so I guess what I'd like to do is make sure that Courtney has guidance from the committee regarding the work on the design guidelines. So I think broadly speaking, with what she's presented tonight, if you are supportive of the direction she's going, what we would envision as she continues to work on the guidelines, coming back to you, especially if there's major components that she needs guidance on, so we can move forward with presenting to you modified design guidelines that address what the committee's objectives are. So I guess in terms of the conceptual approach to what she's proposing, is the committee supportive in continuing in that direction?
I support it, but I would like to know, how will we know what is going into the draft ordinance?
The draft ordinance, which we will discuss when we get to that agenda item, is going to go to the city council from the ad hoc committee. So how the ad hoc committee addressed this is that how a lot of this would be addressed is through the design guidelines. And
Okay, got it, never
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
I got it, so no need to go back to working on the.
No.
Good,
No,
okay.
no.
That was my worry. You're right, okay, good. So we're gonna deal with it in the guidelines. Okay, sweet.
And I don't know if we, again, preliminary, I don't have any problem with the approach, Courtney, but I'm a slow learner and I've got to dig into this before I, make any kind of, but yeah, it sounds to me like you're on the right track. I know that non-contributing properties, either within the district, are a problem. It is, I mean, some of them are pretty obvious, where you build a two-story house in some place that doesn't, that's pretty obvious. But there are others that are non-contributing that are a little harder to define. And there are many of them that were built outside the period, or some that have been built outside the period of significance, which puts them in a different category. So, but anyway, yeah, in general, I think you're on the right track. Looks good to me.
I think one of the main goals of having a new construction and infill section would help kind of reduce some of those really inappropriate infill stuff. And I think that's the most positive impact that it would have.
And then one of the things that does occur to me, that any new construction by definition is going to be non-contributing, because it's outside the period of significance, okay? So anytime you build a new house within the district, you're diminishing the percentage of houses that contribute to the district. And that's a problem, because we already know that we don't have enough houses, and as many houses as we should, that are contributing. So the new construction, to me, is a real bugaboo. But it has to be addressed, and at least it's going to be addressed, which it isn't now. And the other thing are all the houses that are hanging out around that don't have any guidelines. We come up against that all the time here. We don't get to review them because there are no guidelines for the house. So I'm encouraged that there's going to be guidelines for everything. And whether or not they're difficult to deal with, that's something you just have to work at. So anyway, I'm encouraged. I think it's great, yeah.
Courtney, I think you've done a remarkable job. And also, I think it's really great, too, that that we're looking at reconstruction. Some of these homeowners will be able to perhaps reconstruct the historic building itself, which I think some of them really want to when they own a historic home. So glad to see that.
Chairwoman Graham, if I may, as an appropriate next step, my recommendation to the committee, if the committee concurs, is that Courtney would begin working on one example of an updated design guideline, kind of incorporating the comments from the committee, and bring that back before the committee to make sure that she's on the right track. And then that way you could react to that. Courtney, does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think, yes, that's fine. I was overthinking it for a minute, but yes.
Very good. Thank you so much, Courtney. And we'll look forward to having you back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then for possible action. Update on implementation of the committee's goals and priorities.
So this is the monthly report on the activities regarding the committee's goals. In bold shows changes. Obviously, the most significant changes are the progress being made on the draft ordinance by the ad hoc committee, and we're working on the camp training event, and I know that each one of you has been contacted regarding scheduling for that, and so we're looking at that for in May. Any questions with the updates?
No, and of course, we're getting closer to Historic Preservation Day, which will have more information at that time from the ad hoc committee. They're going to be going over the ordinance, so I think the public then can come out and get up to date on what's going on, and we're looking forward to that. And thank you for this. Let's see, what do you call this? Matrix. Yes, thank you for the matrix. Okay, moving on for possible action, update from the Historic Preservation Ad hoc Committee.
Well, we have approved the final draft of the proposed new ordinance, and it's being sent to City Council for some consideration. So that's about all, I think. Blair, do we need to add anything to that? I mean, we're very excited to come to the end of that process, of course, and it's been really a nice feeling to get through that and have something to send to council. So
The only thing I would add, and it was great, we had a great group of folks working on it, and I think it is where it is. We'll see what happens, but I guess I'd like Michael to tell us what's the steps from here on out, but also, do you think it's important to say that if the ordinance were to move forward, and there's actually two ordinances. There's the Historic Preservation Ordinance, and then there's a new ordinance establishing the Historic Preservation Commission. And that means if it passes, the committee is dissolved, and we all have to put in our applications to be on the commission. Is that correct?
I know that was posed to our
Okay.
city attorney, and I don't know if she has an answer to that. But with respect to next steps, so the purpose of the ad hoc committee was to bring two representatives from the Historic Preservation Committee, two representatives from the council, to come together to draft a proposed amendment to the Historic Preservation Ordinance. That has been now accomplished and finalized, and so the duties of the committee have been completed. The next step is taking that to the city council and asking the city council if they would like to direct staff to proceed with a text amendment to Title 11 of the city code. Title 11 of the city code, the zoning ordinance, which includes the historic preservation ordinance, requires a process that includes a public hearing before the planning commission for consideration of proposed changes to Title 11. And then they make a recommendation, and then it goes back to the city council for final action. So the next step is the city council will receive the recommendations of the ad hoc committee and provide direction to staff on how to proceed. Any questions?
So does
Okay.
the Historic Preservation Committee have any input?
If the
In the
city
process.
council directs staff to do that.
Okay.
Because city code doesn't require review of Title 11 by the Historic Preservation Committee. And I think that was the intent with the creation of the ad hoc committee, to make sure there was 2 representatives from the Historic Preservation Committee on that committee.
Can I query the committee? Would they like to review it formally?
Well, we reviewed it once already. You mean like what's going to be proposed to the council?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we should look at it again.
When did we review it?
Oh, quite a while back.
It was like one of the first, maybe it was the model, the SHPO model, and it didn't have any of our city changes. It was just kind of the draft model, I think.
Well, no, but I know the city attorney went over it also. You know, at that time, we'd have to look it up.
I don't
It was
remember.
presented.
My opinion is I don't want to do anything that slows the process down. I mean, we've beat the thing to death, and let's get on with it, as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to see it again until it's done. And I have read that thing, but anyway, that's my opinion. I don't want it to come back to us if there's another step involved, because there's another month of looking at something that has been worked on. I mean, that's my opinion.
Michael, does that prevent it from continuing on its current course? Is that if the committee was to look it over again, I mean, it's still going to go to the council regardless, right?
I guess, and I think maybe I can suggest an alternative, because what would be the objective of the committee reviewing and providing comments? Because the ad hoc committee has finalized their recommendations to present to the council. I'm happy to share it with the committee, and so everybody would have the most recent version that will be sent to the city council.
Well, I think you could share it. That would be enough.
I guess I'm thinking as a, the committee was established to advise the city council. So does the city council want our advice?
And that would be up to the city council. So
leave it up
when
to
this would
them.
go before the city council,
Okay.
They can direct staff to proceed with a text amendment. The normal process for a text amendment is that it goes forward to the planning commission for review and recommendation in a public hearing. If the city council says, staff, we also want you to go before the Historic Preservation Committee, that is at the council's discretion.
Okay.
Well, I'd comment if, we had 2 representatives from the Historic Preservation Committee on the ad hoc committee, and I kind of thought that they would be bringing all of our ideas to those 2 to put it into it, so I'm not sure what good it would do for us to review it again. And because if we, what changes would we make? And then it makes a mess of the process and slows it down. Like, Charles says, let's keep it going. I'm trusting that our ad hoc members here, Blair and Ray carried forth different thoughts and ideas from this whole body. I would assume that they were already incorporated. It wouldn't hurt for us to read it,
Yeah.
but I don't see to do an official agenda item on it. I don't see what a purpose would be in that. Just my thoughts.
I guess what I was asking is not necessarily a review by the Historic Preservation Committee, but as a body that we come together and say that we support the ordinance.
Well,
And at
yeah.
what point, would that happen? I just think that would be a
Well, I think we've already
positive
done that
thing.
by having the ad hoc committee, because that's their job, is to create that ordinance, the committee was. So, but I think just to read it, I don't think it needs to be approved or anything. I think it's already set in motion by the ad hoc committee. But I think we should see a copy of the final draft that goes to council.
I'd like to look at the final draft, but I think, by, Ray and Larry being on that committee and the conversation we've had just right here, if members of the city council are watching this meeting, I think that they would see that we pretty much in favor of what the ad hoc committee is presented. I mean, as best as we can know without seeing every word of it.
Yeah.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Whenever items related to the historic district go to the planning commission, the commission usually wants to know what the recommendation of the committee was.
Okay.
But as Mr. Mays pointed out, if the council doesn't mandate a recommendation by the committee, we would just simply write in the staff report that although a formal recommendation on the final draft was not provided by the committee, we would go into the background about the ad hoc committee and that this committee supports the code draft.
Okay, that's fine. No problem. I think that'll be fine, the process, if we can just see it, before. That's all.
Yep, happy to provide a copy once we make all of the final changes from the ad hoc committee and send that to the entire committee.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. Moving on. For possible actions, matters relating to Historic Preservation Day and award for 2022. Okay.
I took a stab at updating Member Davenport's task list based on the last meeting. One item that should be clarified by the group is on page 69, it was referenced that the two committee banners should be at the LADWP the Los Angeles Water and Power Building, but on page 70, there is also reference to having the banner outside the Dam Roast House. We only have two banners, not three, and the banner doesn't say Historic Preservation Day, it just says Historic Preservation Committee. So I don't know if it's appropriate to have a committee banner outside the Browder Building,
Probably
or
not.
if you want it inside the Water and Power Building, because certainly in the past, you've had it at your committee table, the one
Yeah.
that the public would come to pick up information, et cetera.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think that's all we need. I don't think we need to have it in front of the Browder Building. I think just in front of the LA Water and Power Building, and then on the table, that's fine. I think that'll be fine. And then the only other thing that I noticed too is, it looks like we had 10 tables down, but for some reason, I had 12 tables. I don't know why. But that's the only thing I could find that was different. And then I did check with the microphone and the speaker, and the Park District does own one, so they can supply that.
Was that just the microphone or also
And
the
the speaker, yeah. Yeah, I checked on that today, and they got back to me, and yes, they do have one we can use. So those are the only other, I think too, I kind of would like to hear a report on the railroad, what's going on at the railroad. And I think too, the names were not put into the task list. So, okay.
So what do you want to know?
Well, okay. Yeah, well, last time we talked about a train ride, and I noticed on the flyer, they're offering the train rides at the various times. And then, is there going to be a presentation or anything? Or how's that going to go? From Chris McMahon?
Right, there's going to be, the verbiage that's in the flyer now is what they wrote, okay? View the original bill and discuss ongoing preservation efforts. So there's going to be a presentation that will discuss ongoing preservation
Right.
ordinance or efforts at the museum. They're going to make a presentation.
So they are,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So then when people arrive at 1:30, there will be a presentation?
Yeah, they will, and I will.
You'll be there
I'm
to
not
make
sure exactly what they're going to do. I think they're going to set a table up and probably have posters of some kind, but it's up to them. But there is a presentation, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, and then also, I think the names are wrong.
Well, the
on
names are
task
wrong
list
in
on
here, but
page
they're not.
71.
It's not Frank Carroll and Johnny Walker.
No,
It's, well, let me make sure I get it right, because
yeah,
it's,
on page 71.
it's Chris McMahon, PhD. He answers the phone, Dr. McMahon, so, he's the museum director. And then the other contact, and the sort of the guy that's probably doing the things, is a man named David Held, who's the vice president of railroad operations. And I believe he's also president of Friends of the Nevada Southern Railroad group. So those are the two contacts.
I'm sorry, what was the second name?
David Held, H-E-L-D, and he's vice president railroad operations. And Christopher McMahon, it's M-A-C capital M-A-H-O-N, McMahon.
Yeah,
And he's the museum director.
okay, good. Okay, so we've got those names correct, and they are doing a presentation. Okay, that's the only other question I had. I think everything else looked pretty good. Okay, I think we talked about the plein air session, Ray. That was going to be on March 19th, is that correct? Did they do that?
Yes, we had that on March 19th, on Saturday, and we had 2 artists who showed up at the hotel and did some illustrations, but it is open to anyone that wants to take part. They didn't have to be there on the plein air day, so
Yeah, okay.
artists can work anytime they want on this project.
Okay, so that did happen March 19th?
It did happen, yes.
Good.
It's great.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to make
It's a
sure.
lovely day.
Good, okay. That was the only other question I had. Anybody else have any questions?
Have we got any nominations for the home?
Susan?
Just one.
Just one?
And we can make a nomination right here, right? Any one of us, if we choose to do so?
You can,
From past nominees?
or anything you like, I mean,
I would like to,
yeah.
I would like to nominate the Ash Street Cottages. Norma Morez is the owner. And it was nominated in the past already, so.
Yeah,
We have
I've
information.
started collecting information about the properties that were nominated previously and which ones were the ones that the committee actually voted on, because.
Second runner-up.
Exactly, so I can provide that to you with next month's packet. I mean, it may not be necessary if we get a flurry of nominations in the next month, but if not, you should have more to look at.
Okay, very good. All right, so next month then we'll finalize the award. So I have someone in mind too to nominate if it doesn't appear.
Yeah, and actually, do you want, normally what I do for the packet is when the nominations are up for your vote, is I've got separate sheets for each property, and usually the cover sheet is the website nomination form. So for anything that the committee brings up, do you just want me to provide that without that form, or did you want to go online and do the form yourself to nominate that property? And that way it'd be a consistent format?
I can do that if you think that's preferable. It sounded to me like maybe you already had the
I've got
background, that type of stuff. So.
I've got the background information, but I'd be hesitant to put the email from, like, say, 2 years ago from a different person if that's not the person who's nominating
Sure.
it now.
Okay, well then I'll go online and
Yes,
do
and
that
because any
too.
of you can go online and input the information, and I'll still have the same background information in terms of photos, et cetera.
Great.
To provide.
The one I had in mind, I think has been nominated previously, and I don't know if it'll appear or not. I wonder if you could bring me a form.
There are no forms, it's all online, or you may submit a
come to-
written letter.
A written
You
letter,
know,
okay, I'll do that.
Yeah,
Okay, okay. All right, I'll have that ready for next time.
no, please do it beforehand, just send
Oh,
it to me.
for you, okay.
Yeah, and that
that's
way then I
fine.
can have it in the packet next month, as long as I get it at least a week in advance.
Okay, great.
Well, I believe the deadline is, yeah, that sounds about right. April 17th.
All right, very good. All right. All right, any other comments about Historic Preservation Day?
Is there anything I need to do regarding the schedule? Usually, Susan, you and I work on this, but it looks like this is taken care of.
I can fix the things that we've talked about tonight.
Okay.
And then what I'll do is I'll just email it to the group afterwards so that you can all have that for reference. And if you've got any further corrections, just email your corrections back to me, and then I can send an updated version back to the group again. Because obviously now, we've only got one official meeting left before the event.
Right, right. And I was very pleased with the draft schedule of events that appeared in the packet. I thought that turned out really nice. Thank you.
So where is this schedule? Is this on the back of the mailer? Or is this a handout?
No, the draft schedule is just so you could, the one on page 73 is an idea of a draft of what would probably be made the poster at the event. And then I've already asked our GIS staff person to come up to start drafting a map, you know,
Okay.
that would have the different venues
Okay.
identified on it. And then the idea would be that in terms of a pamphlet or brochure or flyer, so to speak, that we would have the schedule on one side, the map on the other.
Okay.
And then as you did a few years ago, I mean, I can make a whole bunch of copies available to you in case you want to take copies to local businesses so that they have them handy, or so they can tape them up in their window or on something else. And then, of course, we'll take care of notifying the chamber so that they can post it on their calendar. And of course, it'll be on our website, et cetera. But I guess I just wanted to ask, not that things can't change, but in terms of all the times and information on that, do you see this as a final version? And do any other changes need to be made regarding times and how things are described?
I think it turned out fine, and I see that you made the change that we made last month from noon to 1:15, so that the people could get to the railroad. And then also, we shortened up the workshops. I think it's fine.
If I might add, on the utility mailer for April, it says here a presentation by the UNLV Department of History. So I just thought it'd be nice if we could add in there, here a presentation on Boulder City history by the UNLV Department of History.
Unfortunately, it's already gone to press.
It's gone, okay.
Yeah, that's
All
why
right.
we have to file
Fine.
these things up almost a
Fine,
month
no
in
worries.
advance, so.
And
And-
while I'm on that, I'll just add that I did, still trying to get with Dr. Michael Green, talked with him again today, so we got plenty of time. He feels we've plenty of time, so I'm going to get with him the week of April 11th, we're planning. And then when it comes to the water filtration plant, I know I let Michael and Susan know, but Ray White has canceled. He's not going to
bad.
speak for us
Oh,
at the
That's too bad.
plant.
So, I'm sorry, that is canceled, so that is a
he's- yeah.
change to the.
Schedule.
The schedule,
He
okay.
cancelled again.
Okay, so it'll be just the tour of the plant.
It'll just be the tour, and then also the mayor has agreed to help me host the tour there. And when I leave for the panel discussion, he will remain. And,
Take over for that.
yeah.
Okay. Good.
I'm sorry, you said the mayor will be at the filtration plant when you take off. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, any other comments for the Preservation Day and Award? Okay, moving on then. For possible action, discussion, update on the status of properties in the historic district. Yeah,
We were going to select a subcommittee that was on this past agenda item, the last agenda item.
Well, no, that's, hold it, oh yeah, that's part of this agenda item to discuss, I'm sorry, yes.
For historic preservation.
Item A and B.
Yeah.
And as the staff report notes, it is somewhat challenging based on the changes made to open meeting law some years back. It's very challenging to have subcommittees because basically everything has to be done exactly the same as a full committee, including meeting here and having the meeting televised like we do for all committees, which apparently is a city council requirement that all committees, including subcommittees, would have to follow that same procedure. And that means getting the staff available to do that, so.
So no communications between any committee members regarding Historic Preservation Day outside of here, and even if we had a subcommittee, we'd still have to go through the same procedure. Okay, great.
Exactly.
Scratch that.
Okay.
okay.
I've got a quick question, because of this is, coming up, not too far away, and can't have the subcommittee, would it be possible to maybe just schedule a separate meeting, like just, 4 or 5 days before the event? And just have the only agenda would be to discuss historic preservation, and that all 5 could be here and any last minute details, and I don't know if that's, what you guys think about that, or if that's something we can even do, I don't know. But,
Well-
Well, I my main reason for wanting to set up the subcommittee was just that, let's say, for example, I have an appointment with Dr. Michael Green, then I thought it would be nice maybe to invite along other committee members. So for any discussion about what, possibly the topic of the historical context or whatever, that type of stuff. Or any other little thing we might want to just quickly, meet on or whatever. But it's fine. I think we've got it all sorted.
I think it's a good idea, but I think probably if we're going to set up a subcommittee, it'll probably have to be done way in advance. Like for next year, maybe if we set up a subcommittee right at the beginning of the planning session, that way it's on the calendar, otherwise I think it's probably too much trouble.
Well, basically having extra meetings is a lot of extra
Yeah.
work.
I don't
but-
think I would support that.
Yeah, one thing, certainly for any last minute changes or last month changes, so to speak.
Yeah.
Just, if you've got any suggestions or changes, just email us, email me or Michael. And then if it involves, if you're wanting other input from committee members, we will blind copy, and email other members and ask you to respond individually to staff, and then staff can respond to the group if anything is pertinent to the group in terms of that.
Yeah.
So we could
Okay.
just use you as I've got a question for everybody. I could send an email to you, Susan, with that question. You can then pass it out to the other members, and then they'd filter answers back to you. Kind of, is that what you're saying? I just want to be sure we're all on the same page. I don't want to.
Kind of, yes. I mean, we'll make sure we clear it with the clerk's office first to make sure we're not doing anything inappropriately, but I believe we can work out something if needed regarding that.
Yeah, that's why I want to make sure we're doing it right. I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
That's for sure. Okay, is everybody clear now? Any changes? Then we'll go through the city staff. All right, moving on. For possible action, discussion, update on the status of properties in the historic district or other potentially eligible properties. Okay. Action 8, for possible action, committee discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings.
So anyway, I was going to ask for an agenda item to discuss some educational programs for the public. And I propose that we have, we try going forward to have at least two meetings a year that we present to the public, along with Courtney, to, just to educate them a little bit on the different types of homes and districts, different types of groups of housing, what are the contributing features, things like that, just a low-key kind of just general educational, nothing too complicated, but like something at the MUB building, maybe similar to the Nevada Preservation Society's workshops that they put on, something like that. Just get the ball rolling, start discussing what might that look like? Anybody got any ideas?
Yeah, if you recall, what we put on the hiatus temporarily for HP Day is previously there was a monthly agenda item to discuss public outreach efforts. So this would fall exactly under that.
Great.
And the last direction was to bring that item back on your June agenda so you could get through HP Day and all the ward. And frankly, next month's packet is going to be pretty big.
Great.
Since I'll be having
That's
your
fine.
nominations and other background information about other previous nominations for the award. So are you okay with that coming back
That's
in
fine.
June still?
That's perfect. That's just
Okay,
fine. Yeah.
Great.
So at that time, then we'll discuss the format and so forth, how that
Oh, you
would
can-
come about.
Yeah, you can discuss what you'd like and
Yeah.
we'll go forward from there.
Okay, all right. Very good. All right. So now we're moving on to public comment. Okay, each person has up to 5 minutes to speak at the discretion of the chair. Comments made during the public comment period of the agenda may be on any subject. All remarks shall be addressed to the Historic Preservation Committee as a whole, not to any individual member of the Historic Preservation Committee, of the audience, or of the city staff. No person other than members of the Historic Preservation Committee and the person who has the floor shall be permitted to enter into any discussion, either directly or through a member of the Historic Preservation Committee, without the permission of the chair or presiding officer. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this item. Okay, and I don't see oh, there it is. Okay, so if you'd like to make a public comment, you can call in at 702-589-9629. And we'll just leave a minute or two.
Guy in the audience. We do have a person here.
Oh, sir, do you have a public comment?
I was going to say no, but since I'm already up here, I just want to say hello. My name is Greg. I recently bought a place here in town and very interested in the history. And that's why I'm here. I just wanted to try and learn as much as I can, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Oh,
Sure, it's Federbush. I'll spell it for you. F like Frank, E-D-E-R-B-U-S-H.
thank you, and look forward
And
to
thank
seeing
you
you
for doing
again.
everything that you guys are doing. It's great.
Thanks.
It's nice to have you here, Greg. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Anybody else want to call in? Okay, for all practical purposes, this meeting is adjourned. All right.
Lake Tree Court. You know where